everybody.
Hey, Tom.
I'm sorry that I come bearing tough news. I had a stroke about a month ago, 5 weeks ago. It was caused by the fracking industry of the state of California, because I spent 2 days with NRDC digging around in areas where the oil companies, Chevron in particular, had been fracking and developing these pools of toxic waste that litter Kern County. Alan Grayson, I so appreciated your remarks. I don't want to add another issue to your agenda, but Kern County is to the state of California what Mississippi was to the United States back in the day. It's a hellhole. There are 66,000 undocumented workers who live in the Bakersfield area, Kern area alone. Most of them work in the oil fields, exposed to very dangerous substances. The cancer rates are very high in that county. The environmental movement in general has a very good record of local battles in the Central Valley, but never enough. We don't have a Mississippi summer going out to Kern County to try to save farm workers like we did in the old days. We don't have environmental scientists numerous enough to deal with the toxic chemicals in the water, in the air, and I won't elaborate, but it's absolutely shameful that for the last century, even a little more, if you read the books of Upton Sinclair, who preceded some of us to this work, if you read Upton Sinclair, you find that this has been going on for a century. More than that, permits given out left, right, and center to oil companies. Part of our current law is actually if you get a rejection from a permit application quickly enough, it goes forward, and it's just stunning. It's my predecessor not only was Upton Sinclair, but one of my heroes was Carey McWilliams, whose dad was the editor of The Nation magazine and who was a student activist at University of California. And it's in the tradition of Carey McWilliams as a crusading journalist and official labor commissioner of the state of California appointed by the governor 40 years ago that we gather here. PDA is a continuation of those struggles, and it was only about a year ago, I think, that Tim passed, and it was a momentous passage because Tim's dream was to get Bernie Sanders to run for president as a Democrat in the primaries. And Bernie made the call. Bernie showed up. Tim passed. Bernie kept the fight going. And PDA has been essential, along with Tim, in the history of California progressive politics, and especially in the emerging campaign of Bernie Sanders, an old friend of mine. I'm not here to designate or nominate an official candidate for president in the Democratic primaries that are ahead, but I want to leave a warning and a call to you that this is a very important election. It could go in multiple directions. One of the things that Democrats have a tough time doing is working together with adversaries and unifying themselves when there's more than one good candidate in a race. PDA has had plenty of experience with faction fights and arguments, but hopefully out of the experience of Tim and the PDA, there will be a unified effort in the year ahead. The number that matters most to me is 270. Isn't 270 the number of votes you need in the Electoral College to be elected?
Yes.
Yeah, not 250, not 70. You need that number. And that will take more than one nationally recognized Democratic Party candidate or organization to possibly unify this party. And if somebody could give me some water, please. What is interesting about the points of unification when you put the candidates aside, and you certainly include Bernie as being the pioneer, the catalyst. You have to recognize also the climate change movement and its extraordinary achievements in the last couple of years.
Do you want a chair too? You want to sit?
No, I just need to be here. One of the things the doctors didn't tell me when I had the stroke, I went to UCLA for a while. I felt I was gaining strength. I was recovering. I sound like I'm coherent sometimes. But they told me that the best thing I could do was take Ativan, which I have to tell you could be the worst thing that you could do as well. Because after recovering from the stroke with my friends and family in Canada, I was just reaching down for my suitcase and fell over and crushed my skull. And then I learned from the doctors that that's a result of Ativan and other of these drugs. And so they just advised me to take another one. Tonight, when the moon goes down, I don't know if I'll be rising or what the hell will be going on. It's a terrifying experience to face death once, twice, and to welcome the hands you're in, but also worry about other hands that might be in the room as well. So that was my experience, and with California fracking and with the history of non-regulation, I'm hoping that there will be some bills coming soon. That one of them was attempted by Ben Allen. Where is Ben? How did it go?
We died on the Senate floor.
Died on the Senate floor. That sounds like Tom Hayden's epitaph. Yeah. Died on the Senate floor. How did it die on the Senate floor, Ben?
17, and the oil industry killed it. It was really
unbelievable.
Close. Yeah.
So we will be back. However, let me give you my water back. The thing I wanted to say about what could unify our disunified political party and structure are the amazing number of things that are occurring at once. I started by saying the coming of the legislation, the package of legislation that our friend Ted Lieu mentioned and that Ben mentioned, that is on the legislative floor and will probably pass to give California another landmark record. Not all of it will pass, but most of it will pass. Work that has been going on for many years. The other thing I wanted to mention in this regard is that despite my apparent condition. I'm trying to go to Sacramento this week to meet with the Catholic hierarchy from the state and the country about the encyclical drafted by Pope Francis. Francis of Assisi was my patron saint, and it's worth reading. It's a couple hundred pages. I've made it through. There will be meetings, and there's one of the good things about the Catholic Church mandating things, telling people what they must do, which I first learned in the catechisms class, is that they tell you have to read this. Every Catholic, every parishioner, every leader, local and otherwise, has to read this encyclical. It's not that it's the Word of God. It's like just the next best thing, the best thinking by theologians and scholars and scientists who are rebuking the climate denial crowd on behalf of our Pope. And this meeting is already underway in the planning stages. There'll be a couple of small meetings in a few days in Sacramento that I'm blessed to attend. And then at some point, somehow, the Pope issues his encyclical officially to the world, and he speaks with the president of Cuba. I wanted to mention that. It's another book of mine I desperately want to get into the hands of Brother Grayson. And he'll speak with President Obama, and he will speak at the behest of the good Catholic Congressman John Boehner. The Pope will speak to Congress about his encyclical, which puts together in a very few clear passages what we have been saying, we in PDA, the Tim Carpenters among us, Senate leaders like Ben Allen, Mr. De Leon, and many others, that there's no path forward to climate improvement except the path of social justice. Pollution and poverty are one and the same. How are you going to save Kern County from more strokes and more cancer deaths when you can't save Kern County's unemployed, their homeless children, their schools that are lacking in every respect? The Pope has really stated it. I mean, I think it is for this reason alone that this Pope comes from Latin America. And Latin America is the home of liberation theology, besides some lesser chapters. But liberation theology was one of the wonders of the world to me in 1968, when the priests and the nuns were fighting for social justice, were fighting for the poor on the side of all kinds of revolutionaries. And they were fighting against the official U.S. Catholic Church. They were fighting against the Reagan administration. They were fighting against the CIA. But liberation theology was born and was blessed by the bishops of Latin America in 1968, about the time of the Chicago demonstrations. And it lasted, it planted its seeds everywhere until finally the Reagan crowd dismantled liberation theology. But it's back. It's still here in the form of the current Pope, and there are hundreds of thousands of adherents. The idea, everything, I think in the 60s, if you're my age, everything was liberation. The liberation movement of this liberation, that liberation, every imagination. It never occurred to me in 67 that there would be liberation theology, but there was. Every branch of religion on the planet was adopting itself to revolutionary values and revolutionary approaches, and people in California like Father Boyle, who actually is Irish. Susie, another one to add. Father Boyle came out of the liberation theology movement in Latin America and went on to be one of our foremost practitioners and one of our great organizers of poor people, of the downtrodden, of so-called gang members, and still is at it today, Father Greg Boyle. So liberation theology, in the words of the Pope, should be blessed. Blessed be it. And that is going to culminate in September somehow in these amazing events with John Boehner, Barack Obama, the Pope, and let's not forget Brother Raul Castro. Who knows? Big things, PDA, big things are happening. Big things could happen. Days of miracles and wonder may be upon us. Don't write it on your hand yet, but I said it. So we have all of these movements, for living wage, for climate change, for marriage equality. Let's not forget the day of Lazarus, to speak of another Catholic saint who rose from the dead. That is the day that Barack Obama and President Castro simultaneously telecast the news that they were normalizing relationships between our two countries that had been frozen, that had been cut asunder by war, by havoc, by torture, by embargo, by starvation, by blockades for over 50 years. And suddenly, miracles did happen. These two presidents announced that they were going to implement this miracle, and the Pope had a constructive role in making it happen, and they're all going to meet together very soon. So that's the coming attraction that Mimi, I think, is nodding. We also know that things go wrong in life, and so let's never leave that out. But I do think there are occasional shifts in the planet and shifts in public opinion that we need to take heed of. And the unification of the factions of the Democratic Party, including PDA, could not be more important a task. And if people sit down and discuss with each other how they might work together and work through their differences and identify ways to double, triple, quadruple the membership of the organization, the number of chapters of the organization, set real goals for this year and next year that we can look at in PDA somehow, someday, and say, look, we had something to do with that. We were there. This is not an unordinary movement. This is an extraordinary movement. If I could have the water for one more thing. I just want to make sure I don't fall down because of the drugs.
Also, the strides against mass incarceration.
Those
things.
I did mean to mention that when I cited the good brother, Father Greg Boyle. I could go on, but the idea of unifying factions is an old one, and it's not easy, and involves a lot of ego, a lot of competition, a lot of resources. But I think that if anyone can put their mind to the task and do this job, it would be people who have fought so hard in PDA for the past 10 years, sometimes with each other. It's a good learning experience, that it is possible to unify people around a common agenda and move forward. I just wanted to say one other thing before I forget. I saw Bill Rosendahl I love it when he calls me Tommy. That's what the priests always used to call me. There are people here that deserve our thanks. Congressman Liu, Senator Allen. Who else did I see here? Mike Bonin is not here, but he deserves thanks for what I'm about to say. Dorothy and Susie, thank God you're here. Sheila Kuehl, thank God she's here. These are among the people who've taken on the latest obscure cause that eventually triumphs, and that is the preservation of our environment around Sullivan Canyon and Sullivan Creek, which is at the hands of rogue developers from a family called the Namvars, the leader of whom is already in federal prison, as you may know, and they're charging forward to keep raising money. It was just noticed that they gave $109,000 to city council members in the city of LA in the latest cycle of disclosure of campaign contributions. This is a special place. If you looked around here, Sullivan Canyon would be very much like this place, with a few houses missing. It's been there for a long time. It has a running creek under the federal and state laws. It's an actual river, flowing river, a body of water that's on the EPA and water board lists. Yet there was a state official a year ago in charge of water politics in this region, who was approached by the Namvars repeatedly, by Sean Namvar in particular, over and over, asking her, how much money does it take to get ourselves a permit? Now, where I come from, that's a crime, or should be a crime, but lawyers actually tell me it's not illegal to ask somebody how much it would take. There has to be the quid pro quo. You have to get the politician to give the money, and then you have to take an act. Am I right, Senator? I lose track of campaign reform ethics after these many decades. But again and again, he kept offering bribes, and the water official, an upstanding person who's in charge of protecting our environment, has filed reports with her own agency saying, I don't feel comfortable about these people. They threaten me, they frighten me, they keep offering bribes. I don't trust the ownership. I don't know what's going on. Why shouldn't they get a new environmental permit to clear the air and deal with this problem? I would add to that, if there's a campaign reform agenda, why should people be able to take advantage of political situations and contribute money to politicians who then take actions to approve tens of thousands of cubic acres of land being excavated in a tiny spot like this, or crush under rock pile and the rest of it a living stream, an actual stream bed, not far from this, walking distance from us. Should it not be illegal to make those kind of offers? Should it be illegal to offer a bribe to somebody in exchange for a quid pro quo? Why is it not illegal? Where is the law? What has happened to us, people? What has happened? It's unbelievable.
Damn right.
This is a state official, an honest official, has been offered money on more than one occasion to get all these environmentalists out of the way and to destroy Sullivan Canyon and Sullivan Creek. And the leader of this gang of people sits now in federal prison. He was put there by the FBI. He's there. He's in prison. His brothers could have been put with him. But the way this is going, it seems to me, California officials and California, the political culture has become so accustomed to bribes and trade-offs and back scratching that what 40 years ago would have been a big scandal is today only written about by John Schwada in his blog, or Ted Lieu wrote a very good letter. Senator Allen wrote a very good letter. Sheila Kuehl wrote a very good letter. Mike Bonin is on the case. There's a few people. I may be forgetting some. But it's unbelievable to me because this is the way California goes. And this is the year of climate change. This is the year when we're supposed to unify the world around the reduction of emissions and at the same time unify the world around a new deal for the poor, so that there can be a green global fund to at least mitigate the damage to the sky and to the trees and to the land around us, which is happening on a daily basis. Instead of recovering the planet, we are building mansions in canyons using the techniques of 19th century American political bribery. And no one seems to know about it. No one cares about it because everybody thinks it's what goes on. If you ask any pollster, they will say the most common opinion that people hold is that all politicians are for sale. All land deals are for sale. I'm not saying it's literally true, but it's come to a point where people sort of take it for granted, and so that they don't fight for their rights until their rights are gone. And that's the message I want to leave with you. This is a tough message, I know, but this is what PDA has to keep doing. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy a full moon.